On 27 August 1963, a couple went to dive. One came back alive while the other went missing. It turned out that the boyfriend known as Sunny Ang, who said to go there to collect corals, might have another motive of bringing his girlfriend Jenny there. Based on the circumstantial evidence adduced by the prosecution, the jury found that Ang is guilty for the murder of Jenny. The circumstantial evidence in this case fulfilled Section 8 of the Evidence Act 1950, which are motive, preparation, and previous or subsequent conduct. Ang has the motive to murder Jenny because he had been declared to be bankrupt since October 1962. He was still bankrupt on 27 August 1963 and was in dire need of money. Jenny owned a $450,000 worth of insurance policies, which draw Ang's motive to murder her in order to get the money. Ang had also shown his preparatory act in this case. 3 weeks before the incident, Ang took Jenny to make a will, leaving her entire estate to his mother, whom she barely knew. One of the policies expired a day before the diving, and Ang extended the policy for only 5 days. During the diving, Ang allowed Jenny to go down into the water near Pulau Dua alone. According to an expert witness, it is not safe for a novice to scuba dive alone. In addition, Jenny had only a little experience of scuba diving, and it was known to Ang. Ang also knew that the waters near Pulau Dua were very dangerous and hazardous, as he had dived in those waters on several previous occasions. The single flipper found believed to be Jenny's was severed cleanly at the top and bottom. Upon examination, it was found that it was likely severed by a sharp instrument such as knife or razor blade. Less than 24 hours after the disappearance of his girlfriend, Ang made formal claim in the 3 insurance companies which had issued policies covering her against accidents. This showed his subsequent conduct of the event that reinforced the circumstantial evidence in this case. I would say I am satisfied with the decision made. The prosecution built a case against Ang that was filled with so many relevant facts that when it was looked together as a whole, it convinced the jury enough to find Ang guilty of murder. At the time of her disappearance, Jenny had about $400,000 worth of accident coverage taken out for her by her boyfriend. The odd thing about this is, why would a simple waitress who earned about $90 a month have that much coverage? Maybe Ang could be seen as an overprotective, if not slightly paranoid boyfriend by taking out such a large insurance coverage on Jenny. But Ang approached the insurance company the day after Jenny disappeared and proceeded to file a claim for her insurance. Aside from the irregular insurance purchases, the heel strap of the flipper found few days after Jenny was disappeared, and it was cleanly severed. 2 expert witnesses testified that the flipper was severed by 2 clean cuts, which could have only been done by a sharp instrument such as a knife, and not by dried corals, because the cuts wouldn't be clean then. The witnesses also mentioned that a novice diver such as Jenny would have panicked in such a situation due to the impairment in her mobility, and inevitably she would have drowned. This is a well-planned murder, but the execution was lacking. Each fact used up against Ang had continuously successful in proving doubts. Overall, I agree with the decision made by the court. This case relies solely on circumstantial evidence since Jenny's body was not found. The nature of circumstantial evidence was known to be quite weak because it is being derived from set of facts to produce inferences. However, it is still possible to secure convictions based on circumstantial evidence. The issue raised by the defense upon the decision made was that it is dangerous to convict an accused person upon circumstantial evidence. Section 5 of the Evidence Act 1950 provides that evidence may be given in facts as long as it is relevant, then it is admissible. Therefore, circumstantial evidence is admissible. Such in the case of Yap Poon Hai against public prosecutor, the court relied fully on circumstantial evidence in convicting the accused of murder by setting fire to the family home. Among the circumstantial evidence were the neighbor living opposite the accused saw him ascending the staircase alone at 3:50 a.m. in the morning. The petrol station attendant said the accused had earlier bought petrol with 4 empty plastic containers. The accused brother and sister-in-law testified that the accused argued with his wife when she asked for a divorce. Section 8 of the Evidence Act 1950 stated that any fact is relevant which shows or constitutes a motive or preparation for any fact in issue or relevant fact. In another case of Juraimi Hussein against public prosecutor, there was no direct evidence, but there were relevant facts adduced by the prosecution. One of it was when the the appellants in the case withdrew 300,000 ringgit from the deceased bank account a day prior to his murder and went for shopping spree. The motive of the murder identified as the appellants faced some financial difficulties. Other than that, there was a preparatory act where the body was buried in a hole in the ground soon after he was murdered. It means that the hole was dug earlier before his death. Based on the provision and principles in the case mentioned earlier, it strengthens the fact that circumstantial evidence is admissible despite of its weaknesses. There should be a complete chain and linkage of proof which establishes beyond reasonable doubt. One can conclude that circumstantial evidence would certainly be admissible in courts on the basis of its relevance in that particular case. Furthermore, there should be a chain and direct causation between the circumstances on which the prosecution has built its case and the rest of the facts and the act of the accused. In the present case, the decision as to convict Ang as guilty by looking at the effect and in particular the cumulative effect of circumstantial evidence were perfectly adequate. The linkage of each fact starting from Ang's financial situation to his act before and after the disappearance of Channy had successfully proved reasonable doubt. Circumstantial evidence might not work if there is no relevance to it. The evidence itself won't be admissible if it is not relevant. The fact that Ang's action had fulfilled Section 8 and that circumstantial evidence in this case is suffice to prove his crime. Circumstantial evidence has a reputation for generally being weaker and less valid evidence than direct evidence. It is interesting and necessary, however, to emphasize that it is simply incorrect to assume that direct evidence is always stronger or more convincing than circumstantial evidence. Aside from scientific evidence, other examples of circumstantial evidence that may imply guilt include the event, the defendant's motives or opportunity to commit the crime, whether the defendant had resisted arrest, or if any suspicious behaviors were demonstrated. Unlike the incorrect examples perpetuated by television shows, movies, and novels, a majority of convictions are based solely on circumstantial evidence if for no other reason than this type of evidence is more commonly encountered at crime scenes than direct evidence. In my opinion, the perception of that direct evidence is better than circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence should not have been made as an issue in court since it has been proved that most cases were decided based on circumstantial evidence more than direct evidence. The view of that making inferences based on facts being puzzled together is equal to abusing the right of an accused person needs to end. Circumstantial evidence is a valid evidence as being stated by the law, and one must adhere to the fact, and maybe it's time to put a stop of questioning the validity of a court's decision made based on circumstantial evidence.